All right, so let's start this morning with our last speakers of the conference. And we have co-authors, so again, you get two for the price of one. This is, a bargain basement conference, right? Good value, good value. All right, so the ladies that I want to introduce this morning, one of them is a two-service military veteran, United States Air Force and the United States Navy, and retired professional from the aerospace industry. She is a journalist and wrote the wildly popular UFO column New York Skies for the Syracuse New York Times in 2013 to 2019. She holds a bachelor's degree from State University of New York at Empire State College in entertainment writing and production. She was awarded Researcher of the Year 2018 by the International UFO Congress. Her co-presenter this morning, co-author, has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Case Western Reserve University and a library science master's from the University of Maryland. She was the head librarian for the EPA for 15 years. After a career in scientific research and publishing in Washington, D.C., she is retired from Lemoyne College Library in Syracuse, and she is currently publisher of Dragon Lady Media's UFO Scholar and Sky Goddess imprints. Now, what I'd like to say about what they're going to present today is I'm very happy that everybody got off their couch, got in their car, and drove here so that we could be face-to-face again. Thank you for doing that. If you're interested in this topic, you obviously are. You would not drive here and pay to come to a conference if you weren't, right? I would encourage you to get off your couch and go outside if you want to know about UFOs. Go to where there are UFO sightings and look for UFOs. Okay, it's that one question that I still get over all the years. Have you ever seen a UFO? Yeah. Yes, I have. That's why I'm doing this, because I saw one and it changed me forever. Okay? So if you go out into the field, you might see a lot of UFOs. So I would encourage you to get out. These ladies are very much going to help with that, with what they're going to present. Please join me in welcoming Cheryl and Linda Costa.
Good morning. Konnichiwa and Debana. Bonjour. Privet. Okay. Okay, we had to say hi in a few languages. Okay. Very quickly, in the Navy, what I did, I'm an analyst. In the Navy, my DD-214, when I got out, that little piece of paper says what you did in the service. I was a senior electronic warfare specialist. I spent most of my time gathering what we called ELINT, electronic intelligence. And then they figured out on my ship that I had a dark room, and they sent me to periscope photography school, and I began gathering photo intelligence. That's what I did. Can't tell you where I did it, but that's what I did. Later in Lockheed Martin, a 32-year career in Lockheed Martin, 20 years of it, I did in analysis. I mapped virus patterns of computer viruses within the company. I mapped where all the bodies are buried from hackers. Everything, okay? That's what I did. I'm an analyst. For the last 6 years, I have been the face of this research, and everybody thinks it's me. It is not me. I want to introduce you to my dear wife, who is the senior scientist on this project. I've got the arts and entertainment degree. I have the top hat and the cane. So I come and talk at these things. She is the scientific brains behind our research. Linda?
Hello, everyone. This is only the second time that I've gotten in front of an audience to speak, so you'll forgive me if I'm not as talented as she is. But I'm going to introduce and discuss the question why we did this. I'm a librarian, and a lot of people just think of librarians as people who answer questions and, you know, stamp out books at the library. And actually, we go to school and get a master's degree, and what librarianship is about is studying how information is generated, how people who are generating the information communicate it, how it's organized, how it's stored. I specialized in science research. I worked at the National Academy of Sciences, and then I was head librarian at the Toxicology Library, which is the science of poisons, at the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C. So what I wanted to make, one of the things that has occurred to me is that when I started doing the environmental work, this was back in the 1980s, and at that time, environmental science was a very new field. It was a multidisciplinary field, and we had people, there was no degree. No one had a degree in environmental studies. It didn't exist. The people at the academy, we had our PhDs and medical doctors, but they were in chemistry, biology, physics. One guy had a degree in French literature. I had a degree in psychology. I knew there was at least one art historian, but we were all doing this environmental work because it was new and it needed people to figure out how to study this. And one of the main projects I worked on was taking the idea of epidemiology. Now, we've just all come through COVID, so I'm sure you've heard the word epidemiology over the last couple of years. It's usually applied to disease. A definition of it is epidemiology is a study and analysis of the distribution, who, when, and where, patterns and determinants of health and disease in defined populations. The father of modern epidemiology was a gentleman called John Snow. In the middle 1800s in England, they had cholera epidemics. And cholera, of course, we know now is out of the water, but they didn't contaminated water. And he started looking at where people were getting sick, where they lived, et cetera, and figured out that, well, it was all coming from people that were drinking water from one contaminated well. So he took the handle off of it, and the cholera epidemic stopped in that area because they didn't realize that it was the water that was carrying the disease. So the idea came up was to look at, the National Academy of Sciences was founded by President Lincoln back during the Civil War, and at the time there was no formal mechanism for the government to access scientific expertise. So they set up this National Academy of Science, and what the Academy does is they get volunteer scientists, and we're talking Nobel Prize level scientists. These are the top experts in their fields in the country, and says, volunteer to come to all these committee meetings and make a book for us for free. And they do, and very interesting bunch. Scientists at that level is like any organization. There's politics and competitiveness and big egos. But it was really a privilege to work with these scientists, and it really gave me a good understanding of how science works as a scholarly field. Most of them were academics, but some came from institutions. So one of the scientists that I worked for, she was the scholar in residence, Dr. Deborah Davis, came up with the idea of, let's see if we can use epidemiological methods to study environmental problems. And the way they approached it was that, all right, there are certain diseases that we know can be caused by being exposed to a toxin. And one of these is childhood leukemia. Okay, ignore us. Well, I don't know if my mic is working. Yes, it is. Okay. So childhood leukemia can result from being exposed to certain chemicals. And so they started looking at where there were clusters of children getting leukemia in an unusually large number of kids, because it's something that's been fairly... It's yours. It's mine? Okay. Okay, here we are. All right, sorry about that. It was probably me. It keeps my shopping down, if nothing else, you know. So I went to the Cleveland Museum of Art for the first time in years and wanted to buy a book, and they went through 2 credit cards and said, the machine's just not working for you for some reason. I said, okay, I wasn't meant to get that book.
She took down her bank.
Yeah, I took down the bank, took down the health care also. So anyway, where was I? I was talking about epidemiology, toxins and leukemia, childhood leukemia. Okay, so they looked at the incidences of childhood leukemia and where it was clustering, in other words, where the children that were affected were living. And you probably have all heard of Love Canal. That's how they found Love Canal, is that the children in the area were getting childhood leukemia. And they says, well, what's causing this? Because it's not, there's always some in the population, but usually it's caused because of exposure to something. And that's when they found out that the Love Canal community had been built on a toxic waste dump. And they didn't know at the time. Of course, now we have laws through the EPA, et cetera, that you have to disclose if you're building a community on a toxic waste dump. And they try to avoid to do that now because of Love Canal. We don't want our children getting sick because of it. So the idea was, let's look at where people are getting sick and see if we can locate where these hidden toxic waste sites are. This resulted in the Superfund. You probably heard Superfund law, where the companies that left toxic waste behind have to pay for their cleanup, and it's saved a lot of lives and a lot of disease. So what's that got to do with UFOs? So I was looking. Cheryl was writing her New York Skies column, and having to turn out a column every week, it's always a problem to come up with new ideas. And she calls me her muse because I'm real good at coming up with ideas. It's like I come up with the idea, here, you can write on this, and then she goes and writes on it. So she's definitely the writer of the two of us. And she decided to do, just for the fun of it, there's some statistics for places. And she got good response for them. And then we were at the International UFO Conference in Arizona, and Dr. Gordon Spears from California came up and asked her, says, well, could you do a statistical analysis of the UFO sightings in New York State? Because he was looking for, what was a particular Indian cave?
There's some megalithic things down in the Hudson Valley, and he wanted to see if we could correlate UFOs to those areas.
Yeah, so she did that, and as we were working on it, he says, as a librarian, our job is to get information to people who want to do research. I always joke that I can't remember a lot of my childhood because it was a stuff full of chemical names that I had to remember how to spell for when I was a toxicology librarian. And one of the librarians, we're trained to ask how to ask questions, because often when somebody asks, I need this information on this, that's not really what they want, because knowing how information is organized and where it came from, we can, through a series of questions, figure out what it is that they're really looking for. And I took specialized in reference in library school, and one of the really exciting classes I had was government publications. I mean, that was just thrilling, spending a semester looking at government publications. But I learned a lot about how the government collects information, what kind of things they publish. And of course, one of the things the government does is collect statistics. The Census Department and all the other government institutions, agencies, et cetera, collect statistics. And they were not doing this for UFOs. And one of my famous sayings from library school is that just because you want a statistic doesn't mean it exists. And people, well, how many are this? It's like, if nobody counts it and records it, that statistics doesn't exist. Well, we're living in the age of big data right now. Google and Facebook, and they make their money from collecting all this information on ourselves and then selling it to advertisers. So we're in big data, and I thought, well, we need to look at the big data of UFO statistics. MUFON and NUFORC are the two reporting agencies where people report the UFOs that they see. And while they're two separate databases, and one is more statistical than the other. That's where all the stories are, if you want to go see the stories. But nobody was looking at the data as an analysis itself. And Cheryl's got the data analysis skills. I'm not good with the numbers. She can remember numbers. I'm always amazed when she sprouts out, well, there were this many here. It's like, yeah, how can you remember that? So let's do that for the whole United States. Well, it took much longer and more work than we expected. We both used to be federal contractors, and so she's used to tracking her time. And so far, we've spent 6,000 hours on this project since in the last 6 years. So there's been a lot of time devoted to it, and you really have to want to do something to devote that kind of time to it. So we gave Dr. Spears his data, and then we started doing the whole United States, and our first book was published in 2015? 2017. And we updated it. It was I said, let's look at the one thing in the UFO field is everybody's talking about sightings and things that happened back in the 20th century, you know. I mean, it's like, I don't want to read about Roswell again. I already know about Roswell.
It's always like, you know, an FM radio station, the best UFOs from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you know?
Yeah. It's, you know, I says, we're in the 21st century now. We need to look at what's going on now. We need, you know, modern, contemporary information. So we went to do 2000, this century, 2001 to then 2020, originally 2015, and then we updated it to 2020. And we are not updating it again. That's the last book because it's just too much. We're both retired now, and we have other things we want to do. So we are putting out a book on all the shapes. Originally, it's like, well, let's do all 50 states, and it's like, you know, I'd like to take another cruise occasionally, you know. So we're going to start with all the different shapes, and we'll do those first, and then if we get ambitious, we'll start working on the states. We put out the title is UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2020. Unidentified flying objects, frequency, distribution, and shapes. I put a pile of our pink cards out on the registration desk that gives you the information on the title and where you can find it through Amazon. We self-publish through Amazon. I worked in publishing at the National Academy, so I felt that I was qualified to do my own publishing. And she also put out the UFO Beat, which is the compilation of all the New York Skies columns. And so those are nice short essays that if you want some stories, you get that one.
Okay.
The point was to provide this quantitative data and to make available to you, because like I said earlier, in the UFO scholarship, it's the same way. There's nobody who has a UFO studies degree. It doesn't exist. I mean, you can barely get the academics to knowledge of the subject. I worked at a college, and I was personally laughed at by some faculty members when I told them that, well, we just got an article about us in the New York Times, and the one professor says, oh, well, how did you approach it? His wife almost fell over laughing so hard, which was really disrespectful. And it's just, we need to, and one of the ways that we can get respect is to start doing some serious scholarship, like the data analysis that Cheryl has done and other speakers that you've listened to this weekend. But a reference book, which is what we produced, and we put it in paper for a couple of reasons. One, because of the charts and tables, et cetera, you're not going to read this on your phone or your Kindle. You really can't, because it's just too complex in the way the data is presented. Also, as one thing I learned as a librarian, we're in a transitional time right now between print and electronic, and there is still a role for print. I cataloged books the last couple of years of my library career, and the publishers are not putting the reference books electronically because they don't want them stolen. But also because sometimes a good reference book, I mean, how many times have you wanted to be able to grab a phone book and look up somebody's number? You know, I mean, if you have a good reference book and you have it available and know how to use it, you can find some information much faster than if you have to get online and start, you know, signing in and, you know, do all that. So I wanted to provide, also paper right now is the most stable storage facility for information that we have. I've personally worked with books that are over 200, 300 years old, and especially the older books, the paper is just pristine because then they made it out of rags and it was cloth and it didn't acidify. But the paper, we know, will survive at least a couple hundred years, and right now our libraries on their shelves have information that has not been digitized. There are certain books you cannot get in electronic form. It's just not available, and the publishers do not feel it's their responsibility to keep the digital archives either. So there are things that are being published electronically that in 10 years you'll not be able to find it anywhere because nobody bothered to store it. So if you have things like you have a book that you really like, I suggest buy the paper, because if you just have the digital form, you know, if the publisher goes out of business, you're out of luck, the book is gone. You know, the same thing if we have a, you know, solar flares or whatever, and the technology goes down, since you can't read it electronic, you've got to have electricity. But paper, and the next best is microfilm, because microfilm and microfiche, you can at least hold up to the sun and read it with a magnifying glass. So right now, those are the most stable means. So I think I, yes, need to wind it up and let the data analysts get up here and explain these different patterns and where things are. And I just want to emphasize that we counted sightings. We did not count UFOs. We just counted the people that saw something. You could have 200, like Phoenix Lights, you had, you know, hundreds if not thousands of people that saw the Phoenix Lights. That doesn't mean there was you know, 100,000 UFOs up there. There were just the ones that were there. So keep in mind that all these numbers refer to where the people are. In epidemiology, it would be the people that are sick. In this case, it was not that you're sick, but the people that saw the UFOs. Thank you.
And last evening at supper, she told me she was afraid she wouldn't have anything to talk about. Okay. Ray Hernandez, are you in the audience? Oh, darn. Okay. I want you to think. I come from two sides. There's this analytical side, but remember, I'm also a trained mystic. I lived in a Buddhist monastery for 7 years. Okay? So I do have one foot in the woo-woo. I want you to keep in mind, like Ray told me a few years ago, E.T.'s trying to turn us all into mystics, okay? If you see a UFO, an uninitiated person sees a UFO, and they really are slammed by the idea, it expands their view of reality a bit. It's a spiritual experience. So I want you to keep in mind as we dig into the numbers that perhaps E.T. is showing themselves more to us now in an effort to push us towards a spiritual enlightenment. Okay? Keep this in mind when you start seeing the numbers, because I am of the belief, having 6,000 hours in this data, E.T. is pushing disclosure. Trust me. Okay, let's look at it. Okay, that's us. Here's our books. That's the first white book, New York Times. If you want to see the New York Times article, Google NYT for New York Times, Costa UFO. You'll get a 24 April 2017 article about us. That's my book, The UFO Beat. Got all my columns. And that's the book we came out with in 2021. It's a 2001 to 2020. Okay, the reason it's a pink book is because the lobbyists in D.C. for UFOs said if Rubio gets his bill passed, we may have congressional hearings at some point. This was just before COVID hit. We will still have congressional hearings at some point. He said, you ladies are the only ones who've done the statistics ever. So we decided if we were going to be on C-SPAN watching some congressmen and senators question us about our UFO sightings, we wanted everybody to know the book was made by women. It's dedicated, it's, you know, bright fuchsia, you can flag an aircraft with it. It's dedicated to Coral Lorenz, who founded APRO in 1952, which led to MUFON. Okay? All right. that is the United States by county. There are 3,200. That one number is off by one. I just changed it the other day. There are 3,232 counties. Sometimes cities become counties, things like that. Of that number, 3,129 were counties that reported UFOs in the United States, and those white spots are the 103 counties that did not report any UFOs 2001 to 2020. Okay, so, you know, UFOs are a very rare thing. That map got sent to Senator Rubio in his role of Senate Select Intel Committee. And I also gave him a 1.5-inch printout of all Florida. Florida is number 2 for sightings. A printout of all the UFO sightings that we had 2001 to 2020 down to the zip code level in his state. Okay, that got their attention. And when all the cop cars showed up 3 weeks later out in front of our apartment complex, and they were all parked behind my car, I thought, oh my, what did I do? There was a drug bust going on. I didn't know about it. But I looked out there, and there were 3 different constabularies out there. I'm going, oh, goodness, because I knew the box had gotten there. So, all right. The gray line is the total of UFO sightings over the 20-year period. The 2 colored lines, blue is MUFON, orange is National UFO Reporting Center. It's about a 60-40 ratio, 42 and 57%. Now, the jump in MUFON numbers around 2008, that was because there was a Discovery Channel program on in those days that took on a different weird paranormal topic every week. And they did an episode about UFOs, and of course they went to Mutual UFO Network as the experts, and suddenly people knew where to report them. Okay, and so MUFON numbers shot up and they tracked. They are 2 different databases. The crossover is very minimal, hardly measurable. Question when we put out the White Book in 2017. Why didn't you go back 40 years? That's the golden age of UFOs, Cheryl. All right. So when we came out with this next book, we did do a graph. We didn't do the statistics in our book, but we did a graph. Okay, there is 40 years of UFOs going back to 1960 to 2000 before our book came out. Okay, notice the little 6 to 7 year pattern. Like a little dinosaur or a little dragon going across the lawn. Okay, that's the sightings for that. It totaled 13,156 sightings for 40 years. That's what it looks like when compared to the 21st century. Okay? Something happened. Okay, partly it was the birth of broadband around 2000 being delivered. I used to be an IT manager, so I know when this stuff was rolled out, major cities and their major suburbs. So access to broadband is a major driver for the ability for people to report UFOs. Okay? But I also argue a case since around 2001. Remember we had like 9/11, all that kind of stuff? It seems like ET is trying to slap us up the side of the head, and suddenly we have a shot up in the amount of sightings people are seeing, okay? All right, here's what it looks like. Oh, remember that 13,156? I have that many in 2012, 2013, 2014, individual years. And people say the last 40 years was the golden age of UFOs. We are in the platinum age, folks, okay? Notice after 2014, it was falling off by 30% a year. I was writing my newspaper column at that time, and people were writing me, oh my God, Space Force chased them all away, and they ran out of grant money, da-da-da-da. You know, all these reasons why the ETs were coming back, and I kept trying to tell everybody, it's a natural cycle. They'll be back. In fact, I took 2019 off because the numbers had tanked in 2018. And then March of 2020, just before we went into lockdown, George Knapp called me up and says, is your phone ringing off the hook? And I said, no. He says, my phone's ringing off the hook. So I went out to National UFO Reporting Center and pulled the end-of-month data for January and February, stuck them into my model, because remember, I knew it was like 60-40 ratio, and I called them back a half hour later and said, this is going to be the best year since 2012, and it was.
Should I give my theory of the...
Do.
And so my theory, and I have a wicked sense of humor.
Stand up, please.
And I says, my theory is that every 7 years is when the new model years come out for their spaceships. And so they all go home to trade in for the new model. And so that's what the 7-year cycle is.
This is what UFOs look by. You saw previously what it looked like by year. This is what it looks like by month as a sum of 20 years. This is that quiescent level you see here, going out towards the December. Average sightings day to day on this flat thing, but that's also the most consistent area of people who are making sightings: dog walkers and smokers. Okay? And they're considered very reliable observers because they're out there day in, day out. I've talked to MUFON investigators who say when they do a text scan of a text file for the end of the month for their state, they search for dog and smoke. Okay? The peaks are indication of, well, in July, it's 4th of July sightings. Okay? Now, is it really the UFOs or is it the fireworks people are seeing? Linda and I sat in a ballpark after a doubleheader and a fireworks display on the 4th of July, and we let the traffic jam from hell thin out, and we just sat there finishing our sodas. And then she looked up. Remember, there's no fireworks at this point, and there's 2 fireballs hovering up there, and then they both went, whew, whew. Okay? So, yeah, they seem to like our fireworks for some reason. Okay. One of our drivers, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is, I gotta check something. Okay, we're good. One of the drivers is leisure time. People didn't believe it. Well, I had mentioned this on Coast to Coast, and a lot of fans wrote me and said, well, we're going into the lockdown. This is the perfect laboratory to test this, like, leisure time thing. And this is 2020, March and April, through the roof. Okay, a couple of years ago, in the interim between the 2 books, we started analyzing hours of the day. And everybody was very surprised that the peak hours are between 5 o'clock and about midnight, with the bulk of it between 8:30 and 10:30, bedtime. Okay, last smoke, last drink out on the back deck, take the dog for a walk, that type of thing. And so that told us something else. A lot of people used to knee-jerk to me and say, oh, Cheryl, all the sightings are around the major cities. Look at the dots. If you plot them by dots, that's what it looks like. Okay? This told us that the sightings were happening in the suburbs, the bedroom communities, the unincorporated communities beyond that, and the rural areas. Home time, bedtime. Okay? Which we did plot out later and found some amazing stuff. It varies a little bit with each state, you know. This is a look at the shapes real quick. Most of them seen on Saturday. Of course, the crass talk show hosts on terrestrial radio say, well, everybody's drunk and on drugs on Saturday, and of course they're seeing UFOs, right? But I also point out to them that filling out a UFO sighting report is about as much fun as filling out a credit application. So people who are drunk and stoned don't do that. I don't do that. So you'll see there are a couple of other nights. We did find out, though, we didn't understand the Wednesdays and Thursdays, okay? And one of Linda's interns said, well, we're from down south. Wednesdays and Thursdays are Bible study night. Remember, you have to be outside to see something. So if you're coming out from the study, going in your car, hey, honey, look at that, you know, that kind of thing. And Monday is not a day that people peeked out on UFO sightings. Monday Night Football, you know who's out there looking for UFOs? All right. This is the seasons of UFO, of the different shapes. They have seasons. Made George Knapp fall off his chair when I told him this. You'll notice that the peak season is in yellow, and the smaller season, and the greens are the minimum season for the different UFOs. Who knew? Okay, until you correlate the data. Okay, here is peak periods, again, yellow by year. And notice that we were really lightweight back in the early 2000s. I attribute that the people are just coming online with broadband, okay? And then as we get into peak years of the cycle, okay, in 2011 through about 2014 timeframe, the bulk of the sightings come up there. But something I didn't know is there were some shapes had their peak season even during the crappy window there from 2013 to 2018. Who knew? In fact, I remember talking to Lou Elizondo in 2017 MUFON convention, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He says, "Yeah, they're all tanking." I says, "Yeah, but I've got 3 shapes that are on the increase." He goes, "What?" And he pulled up a printout on the computer and printed it out. And when the Saturn Shape ship, you know, the one like the JAL in 1986, that half-mile wide ship, shows up, 2 other ships show up with it, but in greater numbers, like they're the auxiliary craft that go with that big mothership. And I gave him the printout. He got that stoic face, got troubled, and he stuck it in his pocket.
Wasn't the egg-shaped?
The shapes, egg shape's something else. Okay. It is the egg shape was the one shape, and teardrop. We figured the teardrop is a little bit bigger. We think it's a shuttle, and the egg shape is like a little 2-3 person type of scout ship. Okay, but they were in frequencies like you would see with the mothership was like an aircraft carrier, and then you got helicopters doing different types of utility work, you know, in different frequencies of work. So a shuttle would be like the teardrop shapes, and the egg shape was the scout and reconnaissance ship, that type of thing. Again, I looked at it from a military intelligence view of what the services were. Okay, now here's a quick look at doing it by census region. This is like the numbers in various states. Okay, by census. And census was very convenient because we were trying to be able to show this to government people eventually, okay? If you can get them to look at it, you know. He's wearing cooks, nuts, and crackpots, remember? You know, so. Oh, that was another thing that came up. People, when I would go to Office Max or go to Staples, particularly Staples, over the period of time that we were putting the book together, the manager knew me very well, and he said, "Well, did you take out all the kooks, nuts, and crackpots?" I just, don't worry, I managed it, you know. I don't have to look at every sighting in the analysis because it's a wash, because we can go into the statistics and we can just discount a certain amount. You'll see that in a minute. All right, the influencers, population, which is what most people knee-jerk on. Temperate weather, Linda discovered this, that the monthlies in a northern state was kind of like this, moved down to like Virginia and across the country, middle-level states, it starts coming down. Get to the deep south states, there's actually a dip in the hot months of the deep south summer months, okay? And the only other state that's like that is Alaska because it's light all the time. It's what they call white nights up there, okay? And we discovered, when we saw that with Alaska, it confirmed our theory that it was hours of darkness was a driver as well. Even though there's lots of sightings in the daytime, the bulk of it is after dark. Leisure time, hours of darkness, and observer access to broadband. These are the primary drivers. The influencers, proximity to large bodies of water, proximity to toxic ecosystems. They're really interested in our dead coal fields, dead strip mines, dead oil, burning coal mines, fracking fields. They're really interested. A colleague of mine took our data and came up with the ecosystems and the geological fault lines. Tom Conwell, you should invite him to this conference. He's sharp. Okay, high visibility media reports. Now, this is something that was quoted in Blue Book originally. I discovered there are certain places, and you'd be surprised that TV producers want to know something cool about UFOs. And I said, well, I've identified 50, maybe 75 places that had a one-day event that was huge. and nothing else has ever happened together. No, they wanted to go to that one place. It happens there all the time. But I said, I've identified these one-shot things where they had a 1 or 2 day event. April 16th, 2008, in Indiana. Daily average in the United States is about 23 to 25 sightings logged, okay, on a day-to-day basis, okay? That day was 60 in the United States. I did a quick breakout by state and found out it was onesie twosies from most of the other states, but Indiana had 25. This is a state that averages maybe 2 a week. Okay, they had 25 in one day. Went down there, it was 2 adjoining counties and 12 municipalities, all very close to each other. They had a huge event that day, but you never hear about it. It was reported in local papers, but it stopped at the higher cabal of major media outlets. They did not carry the stories, unlike in the 40s and 50s, something get out on the wire and everybody had it. It's being controlled by levels of the 6 companies that control all the media in this country. Okay, and that's not a conspiracy theory. I'm in the business, I know. All right? High visibility media. When that happened, I was watching National UFO Reporting Center records. I went back in there and looked at it. Did people report more sightings, kind of copycat type sightings? No, they started reporting sightings in Indiana in previous years. Oh, now I know where I should report it. Oh, maybe I should report that one I had last month, 2 years ago, whatever. And that's what we started seeing in there. Okay, so there is this ability of people knowing where to report something. Then the generational effect. Maricopa County in Arizona, essentially the Phoenix area, is the #2 county in the United States for sightings. Los Angeles County, not the city, Los Angeles County is the #1 county. It has more sightings than 39 individual states. Maricopa County has more sightings than 36 individual states. We think there's this thing called the generational effect. In LA, they had the Battle of LA in February 1942. Grandpa told us all about it. Maybe if we look up, we'll see something. Okay? Same thing in Maricopa County. They had the Phoenix Lights in '97. Mom and Dad were talking about it. Maybe if we look up regularly, we'll see something. And we think that's the generational effect, has people looking up more often instead of them at their phones. Different way to look at statistics. Okay, we're going to crank through some of these pretty fast because I got some beautiful maps to show you you'll love. Numbers tell a story. Okay, we had 167,632 reported UFOs in the 2001 to 2020 period of time between the 2 national databases. I didn't go out and try to get some more sightings from the MonPod databases out there because their numbers were, by the scale of things, maybe they had a lot of good information before 2000, but they didn't have that much good information for the 21st century. Okay, Linda said the truth is in the exotic shapes to some degree, and it is. And my truth was truth is in the tiny numbers. That's where some of the things I found to be very telling. Doc Valet says 80% is noise. MUFON says 70% is noise. Linda and Cheryl say 68% is noise. We had different criteria. But for the sake of argument, let's say 70% is noise. So let's throw 70% of the sightings away. That's for the people that say they can't all, there's kooks and nuts and crackpots in there, right? Okay, so we have to throw some percentage away. So instead of skimming 30% off the top, we threw 70% away, just for fun, okay? All right, so 30% that is left leaves us with 50,290 reporting sightings over 20 years. Now, if you break that down a little bit on an average, that leaves us with about 2,500 a year for the United States. It leaves us with about 210 a month for the United States. And it leaves us, if all states were equal and DC, that would leave us about 4 per month, every month for 240 months of 20 years. I think that's newsworthy. A lot of editors did not. Okay. So for 20 years, if all states were equal, they're not. They are not. So we have crafted a chart where we do it proportionally based on the number of sightings. Okay? And if you really desperately want that chart, email me. There's an email address at the end of this presentation. I'll send you a PDF of it. All right. Statistically speaking, that is disclosure on a spreadsheet. Now, let's take a look at something else. This one here was a very valiant attempt last summer when all the press was looking at Jeffrey Corbell's videos from the Navy. If we took only 1% of the numbers and said they're the real thing, okay, that would leave us with 1,676 for 20 years, 84 per year, and 7 off-world craft per month, each month for 240 months. Is that not newsworthy? 7 starships coming here every month for 240 months the last 20 years? Editors still crazy. Okay, I sent one paper that as the cover sheet with the map with all the counties, all the zip codes, all of that, with that as the cover sheet. Crickets. Okay, now, there's another approach. They say, this is based on 2 national polls, about 16% of the American public, adult public, says they have seen a UFO. That number is about 42 million people, adults, and I averaged it across the states and stuff. 30% of them is that number, 12 million, okay? And do that over 20 years, that gives us over 600,000 sightings based on their number, their truth, okay? Then we do that by months, and it ends up with 53,000 per month, okay? Remember I said something about spiritual experiences? Maybe people aren't reporting all the UFOs they've seen, but they're having the spiritual experience of seeing one, okay? E.T.'s trying to make us all into mystics, okay? And it averaged about 1,000 per month for 50 states if they were all equal, okay? And when you put a correction factor in there of 1 of 254, basically 1 person in 254 people reports what they see. And that gives us our 4 per month. Okay? The numbers work. Roughly 1 exotic sighting per week, every state in the United States. That's not newsworthy either. Statistically speaking, that's something to think about. Of course it is. Okay, so if we take that number, take all the numbers for the yearly things and times it by 253, 254, whatever, it's the top of a bell curve. Okay, we did each individual state. Some states were 1 in 150. The 250s were up here, and then down the other end was 1 in 400 people for some states. So it was a bell curve. So we take that number, 1 to 254 is roughly what it is. But if you put times it, look how many millions of sightings we've had. Think how many mystical experiences we've had. That should blow your socks off. Okay? Just in the peak year of 2012, there's 3.5 million people. Okay? Potentially. All right. Arkansas. Let's do a quick look at Arkansas. Arkansas had 1,468 sighting reports. Not a heavy hitter. 35th in the country, about 73 per year, 6 per month, and about 4.5 per week. Only 2 counties did not report them. Okay? And if you do it by zip codes, they have 590 zip codes and 281 reported UFOs. Those are the green ones. Yes, we can plot down to the zip code now, okay? Isn't that something you've never seen? All right, where are the hot spots? People, oh, this is my favorite question. Cheryl, where are the hot spots? Now, in the last couple of years, there's been these people who printed out these things that said, Maine and Vermont are the hot spots. per capita wise they look that way, but Maine is one of these states that's lucky to have 30 in a year. Okay, are you going to camp out for the UFO sighting party and be there for a year, growing your beard? You know, I mean, it's nasty. Okay, so I always ask the question when they say, where's the hot spot? And I say, do you have a specific state, county, or zip code? Do you have a specific silhouette of UFO you want to see? Remember, they have seasons. By the way, there's specific seasons. Do they have distinct peak seasons? And different UFOs have different stomping grounds, which we will see. Okay? Take a few minutes and consider setting some parameters for me. Okay? Any comments there? Oh, what am I going to run into? There's Velcro on this thing. It's attacked me. Okay. It had me. All right. Oh, you want to know what zip code is ground zero? 85001. Phoenix, downtown Phoenix. 85001. And I have a list of other hot spots as well. Let's look at UFOs are and where they are not. Okay, remember we talked about the 103 counties where they are not? Most of them are rural counties. They are poor counties, and they seriously lack for broadband. I've done that preliminary research, okay? And the way we had to find that was we printed out, we made a list of each state's county that had reported sightings. I got a golden list of counties from Wikipedia. We compared it, found out what the outliers were that put a null setting in the database. So we know which ones they are. Okay, now how about some finer resolution? This is by zip code. The blues are zip codes where they've been seen. There are 41,692 zip codes, and we had 18,632 report UFO sightings. Okay? This is Alabama. Blues are where the zip codes are. This is Alaska. This is Arizona. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Looking at the clock here, I'm good. All right. Here is Arkansas. Here is California, Colorado. Now, there are people in the audience who are going to say, "What, are those near a nuclear power plant? Or are they near this? Or are they near that? Can we correlate it to a particular ley line, whatever?" But, ask me for some of this information, and I'll give it to you for your state. If you want to correlate it to ley lines, gas lines, pollution fields, knock yourself out. I don't correlate to that, and I don't correlate to cloud cover and heat maps on the ground. I just add them up. Okay, Florida. Rubio got this one too. So, okay, Georgia. Idaho. Hawaii. It's tourist season. Okay. We couldn't figure out how come there were 4 hits during the year. I took them to a travel agent. Oh, those are the 4 major tourist seasons in Hawaii. Okay. There's some running around you have to do in the analysis job, All right. This is Illinois. This is Indiana. Iowa. Kansas. Kentucky. Now, oh, by the way, people say to me all the time, can you correlate it to cattle mutilations in Kansas? Yeah, I did that with the first book. Okay? And I had good data from an agriculture magazine in Kansas. I sent them a report of the thing. Crickets. Despite the popular notion that all the cattle mutilations are happening are in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, that kind of thing, change your paradigm thinking. Think livestock mutilation. Every state has it. Every state has it. Okay? And that's how we debunked the 37th parallel being UFO superhighway. We have our data can go down. We have it lat longitude as well. Now, let me explain why we did that. in 2020, we were starting to look ahead to publishing the book in 2021. I did a couple data runs on some things because we wanted to take it down to a finer resolution. And then we figured out, 3.5% of people didn't fill in the name of the city. So we had to make an unknown county in every state. They told us what state they were in, but we had to establish a placeholder, unknown, and put unspecified for the cities that were not filled in. 7.5%, now this is a big number. We're talking almost 50,000 people here, okay, did not spell the name of their city right. Yeah, or if they did spell it right, the mix of capital letters and small letters were something we couldn't search on. They put a space in the front of the thing instead of just starting out with letters. The other thing that came up is they might spell the name of the city right. They would say, Eureka Springs, Arkansas, right next to the Best Western. And data can't sort on that stuff. So by this point, it was summertime in 2020. I decided I was going to have to correct this using a golden email list. We merged it in different colors so we could catch all this sorted by state, county, or state and city, and started fixing the counties. In some cases, our original automation wasn't accurate enough because of those weird statements would throw out a curve, and we fixed it. It was an 850-hour effort that spanned from the middle of August 2020 to the first week of January in 21. It was like going back to work at Lockheed. It was a 7-hour day, 5 days a week until January of 21. It was an arduous process to fix all that. Yeah, I'm passionate about it, you know. Okay, Maine. That's very serious woodland up there. That's Bigfoot country, too. So, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Mississippi, a lot of poor counties there, okay? Oh, yeah. Hey, if your state's there, give us a yell here. You know, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York. Okay. Oh, by the way, so you know, since New Yorkers are beat, people always think, oh, it's up on Lake Erie, it's the ground zero. Or they'll come to me and they'll say, oh, Cheryl, it's the Hudson Valley. Suffolk County, Long Island, Montauk Point, all that whole area. That's ground zero in New York. Okay, we're almost done with the states. North Dakota, pretty scant there, isn't it? Rural, no broadband. Okay? Rural broadband is more than UFO sightings. It is industry, farming industry, mining industry, oil research, things like that. We need rural broadband, and we need it like yesterday. Okay, it's kind of, we need a TVA authority kind of thing for the United States for rural broadband. We need it. Okay, Oklahoma. Oh, let me go back to that one. Okay, Oklahoma. There you go. Yeah. There's Oregon. We're almost there. Pennsylvania. Again, Bigfoot country. Rhode Island. South Carolina. South Dakota. The hot county is over there, and it's Minnehaha, and it's an Indian reservation. In fact, the local newspaper did a huge piece, and they used my data and picture and everything. It was kind of fun. Tennessee. Tennessee is how I'm told to pronounce it. Tennessee. Okay. Texas. Okay. 254 counties, and there's the zip codes. And, okay, Utah. Erica Lukes loved that one. And Virginia, we're almost there. Washington. West Virginia. Wisconsin. Wyoming. They have really big zip codes in Wyoming, if you noticed. Okay, now here's something you'll never see except from us. Here, say that again.
You missed Minnesota.
Did I miss Minnesota?
You did.
I'm sorry. Did I skip over it, or did I leave?
He has no sightings.
No, they do. They do. They do. I might have missed it. I might have missed it. Okay, here is UFOs by state. Okay? So we look at a particular state. Here is the United States, and this is the incidence of blimp UFOs. Okay? Here is boomerang UFOs by zip code. Some states don't even have them. Okay? Here are bullet missile UFOs. Here are changing UFOs. Now, these are the ones Dr. Valet think are really cool. You get all your equipment aimed up on it, and then it changes shape on you. Okay? Now, we have two theories. The best theory we have is it's got AI in it that has telepathic ability, and it knows we're looking at it, so it gives you the illusion by drilling back into your own consciousness, telling you it's something else. Okay? That's our theory. Oh, by the way, changing UFO, only 2,486 over the 20 years. But you can set your clock by them. They're as regular as a train. Okay? Only 73 to 123 per year average, and about 100 a year. And they're as regular as anything. And that's very telling. Remember, early on I said, the truth is in the tiny numbers. These guys, when you graph all the UFOs, their line is so small, you hardly can tell it from the bottom of the graph. It's that small. I almost missed it. Okay? If I hadn't heard Valet on Coast to Coast one night talking about it, I went in and did a special report just on changing UFOs, and where are they? And then I did it just by that type, and then we saw how big it was. Okay? Chevrons, wedgies, or as Earl Grey from California says, V-shapes. Okay, cigar shapes. Circle UFOs. Cone UFOs. Cross UFOs. Cylinder UFOs. Diamond shapes, notice that they're rare too, 2,500, 79, okay? Disc UFOs, your classic dad's UFO, as I say, or granddad's UFO, okay? Dumbbells, only a few of them, very exotic, very rare. Egg shapes, fireballs. And they are not Chinese lanterns because Chinese lanterns don't move at 600 miles an hour. Flash UFOs. Formations. Light, just that light in the sky thing. Ovals. Saturn shape. This is that one that's the wings of the thing, you know, as it goes out, are two 747s long. Okay? It's half a mile wide, acorn shape, sort of speak. And they have the agility, they can move faster, maneuver faster than that 747 for Japan Airlines. Okay? Amazing ship. And when these babies show up, so do teardrops and eggs. Can't say they are related, but it's kind of curious, okay? And when I say curious, because they have the same, well, more sightings for those smaller shapes, they have the same overall pattern together, okay? Sphere UFOs. Yeah, this one's great, 17,000. Last summer, report, and after they showed that piece of infrared footage from USS Omaha, in 2019, from 2019 with a sphere UFO. A reporter on the West Coast called me up and says, are sphere UFOs a thing? I said, yeah, 17,113. He about fell off his chair. You know, is again, these people have no skill. How much stuff is going on? Okay? Okay? Rectangle squares, star-like, teardrops, Tic Tacs, triangles. Dave Marler, are you here? Okay, good. I plan to send you this one. And that's it. And that's where you can reach us at CherylCosta.ufo@gmail. Okay? And if you call me on the phone, say, hey, I was at this conference. Otherwise, I think it's somebody trying to sell me an auto warranty or something, you know? Okay? I don't put people's sightings into our database. We have frozen the database. Don't call me up with your sighting. I'm not interested in it. Call MUFON, file it with a NUFORC or MUFON. I'm not interested in it. Okay? We have frozen the database as the first 20 years of the 21st century. That is our contribution. Okay? State University of New York at Albany eventually will have our database. They've taken my papers and 25 crate loads. So they are going to take the database, and probably after we're dead, they'll probably publish it or something. Okay, we can take your questions. Linda, please, your questions. Come on down. Don't be shy.
Keene Turner from Oklahoma.
You got to have it up
I
here.
just wanted to ask is this available online for us to search?
No.
Will it be?
People steal it online.
Oh.
No. In fact, we did not publish our book in Kindle form because I had a book published a number of years ago, and it was all over the internet for free 2 weeks later. So I don't publish anything on Kindle anymore. And the data stuff is too... it doesn't look very good. In fact, I have a Kindle version of our first book. One copy. It's mine. It's on my on my Kindle. And I was doing a radio show one night, and I was trying to move the thing around and scale it up so I could answer the question. It was just easier to have the book laying in my lap. Okay, boom, boom, boom. There it is. Okay, so no, we're not going to do Kindles on any of this, and we're not going to be I just took down our website. We're not going to have a website anymore. Hackers took it apart 3 different times. Okay, one set of hackers took it apart and left a little message up there. You should be doing case studies. Case studies are individual autopsies. We decided to do the epidemiology study and look at the disease model. Okay, in this case, the spiritual sighting model. Okay, and this, if you notice the numbers, it lays big support to Ray Hernandez's view. They're trying to turn us all into mystics and make us spiritual. They're really worried about us, and I believe they have nanny intentions. They're trying to protect us from ourselves.
Good morning.
Here's a hard question.
I'm not going to give you a hard question. That's for the show.
Go ahead.
Okay. But I was interested when you were looking at Alabama. Excuse me. It seemed to be almost entirely circles. I mean, there were some variations, but the actual numbers looked like it was primarily circles. Are pie plates circles?
Yes.
Okay.
Normally, people think the circle one is a circle of lights is what usually is considered. Okay? A pie plate would probably be considered a disc. Again, it's subjected to the person who's reporting it, what they thought they saw.
And just a note about the whole disc. One of the things that drove us crazy with the original book is that one database spells disc D-I-S-K, and the other spells it D-I-S-C. And so do we list them separately? You know, I mean, it's just cleaning up a database is a issue in itself.
We changed the spelling on the NUFORC one to match the one from MUFON.
Okay. Well, you know that when I had a sighting, I get a lot of them that come over the mountain and just park for the meteor showers and stuff, and they just hang out there. Is that common?
Meteor showers during a sighting?
Well, the sighting is they come over the mountain behind my house, and it's consistent. It doesn't matter which shower system,
She's
which
saying the
system it's coming
UFOs
from.
come out to watch. Seems
They
like
come
they're
to
coming
watch
out
the meteor showers.
Yeah.
Or they're just out there watching
fireworks. You figure they would
Yeah,
watch.
they watch everything.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
No, they seem very curious about everything. And as I said, they're interested in our fault lines, goofy stuff that happens around fault lines, fault lights, things like that. From, you know, they're very, very prominent along. Anybody from the Midwest, the Madrid Fault, they're very popular around there. Okay, so yeah, they are interested in everything going on.
It just seems so odd.
Yeah, it is odd, but then again, we don't think like they do. Different logic. Different logic.
You know that I myself am strange and unusual. So.
Well, hey. We both had that T-shirt.
Refresh my memory. What shape was it again? What shape was it again that you said was really remarkably consistent?
Oh, the changing shape.
Exactly. What was the consistency?
The amount of times, it's tiny numbers, but it was consistent between about 73 and about 123 sightings. There was 1 year, it was a little bit more than that, but it was an average of about 100 sightings per year. It was that consistent with the amount of times it was being reported.
So overall numbers, not location or time of day, or because there's a lot of parameters. So when you say it was remarkably consistent, it was remarkably...
How many per year?
Yeah, total
consistency
number per year.
Okay, but let's say, remember I said a majority of sightings occur between 8:30 at night and 10:30 at night. So there's the other consistency.
Okay, so of all of this data that we've looked at, which is remarkable, absolutely remarkable, what is your conclusion?
In what context?
Go for it.
As an analyst, they're watching everything, they're mapping everything. Ever since we set off nukes in 1945, they have been watching, oh my God, the idiots have a box of matches. Okay, and they have been consistently telling us, please give up nuclear weapons, you're going to make yourself morbid. Okay, and that's been a consistent thing as well. Okay, everybody comes back from being touched by them, and he said, wow, those folks are great, and they told us to take care of our planet. That's consistent. And a lot of these sightings are around toxic areas, dead coal fields, like I said, dead coal fields, dead oil fields, fracking fields. Now, people say, did you correlate it to, nuclear reactors? There's 55 nuclear reactor sites. That's not my information. I got that from one of the lobbyist groups. I ran, remember, I can go down to the zip code level. I ran them against county. I ran them against city. I ran it against zip code. No.
And remember the scientific truth that correlation is not causation.
Yeah.
Just because something happens together, it doesn't necessarily mean that one caused the other. My conclusion about this is I basically have two hopes out of this. Is that I'm hoping, as a psychologist, the idea of how do our minds work, how do our brains work, how does our meat turn into thoughts? They have no answer for that yet. And that's why the whole mystical thing, but also I feel that from a scientific standpoint, we will not be able to figure that out about ourselves. When we study behavior in chemical, et cetera, we're experimenting on rats and lower life forms. Well, I think we're their rats. And if we're going to get an answer for that connection, it's going to come from somebody, another species. It's not going to be from us. And the other thing is I really feel that I'm hoping that they are looking out for us. The nuclear war thing, when I worked at one library, I did interlibrary loan, which is people, you borrow books from other libraries, and so I had professors borrowing things from other libraries, and he was researching nuclear winter and what happens after a nuclear war. And the books he was bringing in that I saw were really scary. I found one useful thing, though. If there's a nuclear war, you know where you report to get government information? Your local post office. Because your local post office is where the federal government reaches us at the smallest level. So if we get bombed, go ask your postmaster what to do.
Okay.
But also the thing
Go
is
ahead.
that I was in the Reagan White House borrowed a book from us called The War Economy. And I think like Steve Bassett says that we're very obsessed with war. And I'm hoping that you know, the Federation or whoever will help learn that this is not a good way to interact and that we need to stop with the weapons in the war.
People have asked me, did you track it around military bases? Pre 9/11, I might have been willing to. But trying to track military bases post 9/11, I wanted to not spend the rest of my life in Leavenworth.
Yes, we don't want the men in black or the FBI knocking on
or
our
the
door.
FBI. You know, it's bad enough as it is, what they do to us. Believe me. When we were working on the database, we would take every weekend, we would take a copy of the database and put it in an envelope and give it to somebody at work to lock in their desk. And then the next week, we would put another thumb drive and lock in the desk because we kept getting up and finding our alarm turned off, black cars, tinted windshields parked in front of the house. It was pretty ugly for a while, okay? Bottom line, because we got the data. They don't even have this data, okay, unless
We
they
don't
stole
think
it.
they do.
We don't think they got
If
it.
they do, they're not telling us.
They got it out of our computer. But people were asking about military bases. After the Cold War, most bases were thinned down or decommissioned down to National Guard or Air National Guard or reserve bases, okay? Lou Alessandro and I had 3 conversations at one point, and I asked him about this aspect. And he said, really what they're haunting are our facilities and our fleets where advanced technology, AKA nuclear weapons, are. Okay, particle beam technology, nuclear weapons, that kind of thing. That's what they're really intently interested in. They don't go and haunt some reserve base someplace unless it's actively carrying really advanced stuff. Okay?
With the assumption that perhaps different species would present with different shapes or forms of craft, and with the assumption that perhaps different species have different relationships with us. Some might assume we're the lab rats. Some might see us as the pet dog. Some might see us as the flowers in the garden. With that in mind, I'm curious to know if you saw any consistency among craft for locations. Perhaps one particular type of craft might be interested in toxic dumps. Perhaps another type of craft might be interested in some other type of location. I wondered if you looked at that.
Well,
We only acquired the ability to do these down to the zip code level in the last 6 months. Okay? So this is, again, people say, why aren't you adding this year and next year? You know, we've got enough to deal with the 20 years we have. Okay? No, we haven't looked at that stuff, and we'd like to, and maybe some other people might want to sit down with us and look at that stuff too with these ideas. But I've had a lot of people try and throw an idea like that over the fence at me and say, well, did you compare it to heat patterns on the ground? You know, cloud patterns, everything, you know. Not enough hours in the day. And oh, by the way, the Pink Book was, she put in the preface, here we are 5 years later doing the government's job. Okay? A retired aerospace analyst and now a retired librarian. Okay? We don't have the resources. And heck, Dave Marler, he's got file cabinet after file cabinet. He had to build an extension on his house to handle all the file cabinets of stuff all these former groups are sending him in paper form. He needs a grant, and he needs a small army of paid interns to help transfer that data into a database. So if you want to do something for UFOlogy, okay, and this is not about us selling books. These libraries get their books a different way. But if you want to help push disclosure, go to the information desk at your local library. Don't write them a letter. Go over there and talk to them face to face and say, I'm a patron. Would you please get this book? Go online, go to Amazon, find the Pink Books thing, print it out, take it to them and have it there. Now other people can check it out. People who can't afford to buy it. Other people can reference it in the library. Other libraries see that that book is getting stored, they'll buy it too. It's not so much about us making money on it as much as getting the information out there. Please. Or buying it and donating it, but the thing is, they do have money. They might whine about not having money. They got money, trust us. Yeah. She knows all about that.
One of the things about the shapes is that she had put on the secret is in the shapes. And that was the thing that struck me, that, we have all the, on this planet, if you have sort of a box shape that people can get in and has 4 wheels, you figure it's a car. It's people transportation. But you look at all these varieties of shapes of spacecraft, or whatever they are, they may be from another dimension, et cetera. We don't claim we know.
All the above.
All the above. That, having this variety of different shapes, to me, implies a lot of different civilizations and a lot of different cultures. That, I meant you've got the, the boring Bohr cube, which is a cube, and then you have the more elegant designs like the eggs and the, the triangles, et cetera. So I think, the variety is also something to look at. And yes, and when we bring out the shapes books, you'll be able to, if there's a particular shape you're interested in, get that book, and it'll show you where in the country it is and how frequent, et cetera.
And it will drill down to the city and zip code
And you can
level.
do the research and write the book about, the stories behind it and do the analysis. So like I said, I'm a librarian, we're both pretty old, we're going to be dead within 20 years, and that, we're trying to leave behind this legacy. I tell her we're the Van Goghs of UFO research, is that we'll be famous after we're dead, so.
So what we're trying to do is we're going to do either each individual shape with the big numbers and the ones that are related sizes of the exotics. We're going to do a book just on those sizes, those shapes. Okay, so like that Saturn UFO, we're going to put that in with the exotics. But triangle, we're going to do all the triangle data down to the zip code or city level for all 50 states in that book. We can't print out that in a reference book because it would be about a foot and a half deep. We calculated it. So we're going to, California alone would be 520 pages, okay, with all their sightings, 21,000 worth. So we're going to print out a series of UFO shapes books, and if we still have the energy at the end, we might do 50 individual state books. Okay.
She's going to do it.
There's not a lot of literary in there. We've got the ability to do it. The hardest and most time-consuming thing is formatting the tops of the pages. And the cover. Each cover has to be within a 10-page tolerance of the number of pages that are in it. Okay, that's the complicated part. Running the reports is easy, but it's putting it together is the issue. So we're looking at doing it. We had set a goal this year to produce all the state books, and then we backed away from that and said, let's just do the shapes first and find out if anybody's interested. Okay, so this guy's got a question.
So you said extraterrestrials want to make us mystics. What particular religions or rituals or practices would help us pursue that type of mysticism?
Start meditating. 2 minutes a day. 2 minutes a day, every day. After about 3 or 4 months, move it up to 5 minutes a day. And after about 6 months, maybe 8 months, move it up to 5 minutes a day, 3 times a day. Or 5 minutes, 3 times a day. Use a little kitchen timer. That's what I use. I lived in a monastery for 7 years. Hey, I used to be able to do 45 minutes. These days, all I need is 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at lunchtime, 5 minutes. And if that 2 minutes seems like too much, you're at work, go in the ladies' room, go in the men's room, close the door, hit the timer on your phone.
The idea is that when you learn how to quiet your mind, it opens to receive other things.
Over time. And those 2 minute ones help you deal with all this crap will come up. Your boss yelling at you, your kids yelling at you, somebody else yelling at you, your family hates you, whatever. It'll all keep coming up, but you'll burn through it. Don't hang on to it. Just let it blow by you like a ghost, okay? And then after that stuff starts going away, you'll find, oh my God, I meditated for 5 minutes today because there's nothing bugging you. And then it gets easier and easier, and the more you quiet your mind, the more you're connected to everybody, everywhen, everywhere. okay?
It's great for your health, too. They've
It's
proven that.
excellent for your health.
You know, stress levels and blood pressure and all that
But
kind of
once you get yourself up to 5 or 10 minutes a day, be quiet with your thoughts and simply ask a question. One question. One very clear question in your head. Don't expect a booming voice from the sky, but then the next time you think about it, you'll know about it. You get a download. Okay? I found that out in a monastery. I had been told to go contemplate a particular thing, and I did. I did it every day for months. And one day, Mama looks at me and asks a really hard question, and I knew the answer. Asked another hard question. I knew the answer. Okay? And the information's downloaded. And there's a teaching they used to use in some karate studios and in the Zen community. Know. K-N-O-W. Know without experiencing. That's what remote viewers do. They know about that thing without actually experiencing it. They know it at a distance. Einstein talked about creepy things at a distance, right? Okay, this is it. And the universe, as Heisenberg said, is stranger than we think and stranger than we can think. But yeah, you can do it. Just start with 2 minutes a day. Keep a little journal. Make the notes about what crap came up and bugged you. And then just slowly let it go. And over time, you can't sit down and do an hour the first time you do it. People think, well, those Asian monks can do it. They started when they were 7. Okay? So that's the way, that is the channel to getting into this. It's not a ritual. Hey, I'm a card-carrying retired witch of 44 years. The trick to everything mystical is quieting your mind. And if you're manifesting, as a Wiccan witch might do, thought into form is how it works. So learn to meditate. Heck, even when I was in Christian school, Catholic school, they told us to meditate. Okay? Meditate. It quiets you. And it's good for your health. And it also connects you to all the knowledge, all the love of the divine. Do it. It's the best thing you can do. And the Army's even making their soldiers meditate because it helps manage the PTSD. Managed mine. Okay, sir.
Similar question, really, because I was just kind of curious with that.
Closer to the mic, please.
The mystic journey for a while. Different things led me to different things, to different things, to different things. This is my first time coming to this type of an event. And it seems like I've learned now that these things happen for a reason. Okay, you mentioned David Marler needing help. I had a conversation with him that was, to me, very moving. I don't exactly understand why. You know, he's like, come out and have a beer with me, that kind of thing. And I'm like, but that would be wonderful. What do I do? What am I doing? And your mystic part is what interested me because we're following a path, but how do you follow this path? Because it's like, then I hear the Bigfoot type stuff, Sasquatch things, and like how this plays in, because then it's sparking my mind again because I'm looking at it in a different light. Footprints start from nowhere, they end in nowhere. It comes, it goes, it's this. I saw, you know, my experience was in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah.
Sitting there above the Sandias, shining silver bowl. I stopped, I got out of my vehicle, I'm looking at it, I look down the side of my vehicle, it's not moving. You know, I watched and watched and watched until I finally actually got bored. And I was like, how did I get bored with that? How did I get bored? And I could think, I'm going to go home and watch it on the news. It wasn't on the news.
Yeah.
You know the Bigfoot hunters, and I have a great deal of respect for them, and I also have a bit of disdain for some of them. Mm. I wish they would take a few less cameras and take a mystic with them sometime.
Yeah.
I mean, a serious mystic with them sometime. They might just get a conversation.
Well, and I think with what you're saying, too, is even like Moody, a lot of things that he said, I don't know these guys, I don't know anything about him, but one of the things he said was the mystics have known, and this is something that I believe as well, is like a lot of these things are kindergarten level, it seems like, that we're learning, but they've known for thousands of years. He was asking about religion, the gentleman before me. I don't think it's a religion, but, you know, the mysticism part, the witchcraft, I mean, we're looking into all these things ourselves.
There was an informal program, I can't get into what it's called, in the Navy, but it was very informal. They would identify who the psychics were on board the ship, okay? And it would be somebody be reading tarot cards on Saturday night when they were deployed or something like that. They'd identify them. They'd figure out who they were. And gee whiz, commanding officers began treating them like the proverbial canary in the mine. if there was something goofy going on in a war game or something like that. Hey, Joe, where's the frigate? You know, that kind of thing. Okay, it was respected. Okay, even though a lot of people crapped on the Stargate program, which was the remote viewers. Did it go away in 1995? Everybody said, oh, it went away. No, it went dark.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'll tell you one thing from the remote viewing classes that I taught over 20 years. One of the target cards that always made it into the queue, we didn't know when, but it made it in the queue, was the White House and a couple of certain military installations. And guess what? They're warded. Okay? So somebody knows about this mystical stuff in the government. I must go.
Can I say one thing? Just
One
as a
last
little
thing.
side
Go ahead.
note. Was it Miss Linda?
Yes.
You made the librarian story interesting to me. Just as a side note. Honestly, because I thought, just like everybody else thought that I've known, you know, the librarian with the bun on the head, and that was the kind of thing.
I
you
don't
know,
have a bun,
We'll
you
get
know.
you
Marion the
book.
librarian.
Yeah, right. But you did. You made it like very
Yeah.
interesting, like what you actually do and what's going on behind those people. I used to use them in the corporate world where I work, but I never knew what they did. I just call them and they say they find things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just appreciate it.
It's our magical power.
Explain that.
I have to cut you off now. Here, you guys can still ask questions, but the reason that I need to kick you guys off the stage and have you go that way with your questions, and please pin them down during the break and continue to ask them questions. But we got to set the stage up for the speakers panel. So half an hour break, and we'll be back.